Hello guys, Ancient Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm really happy to bring you the review of the RX 9070 XT, and for that I want to thank AMD for sending a review sample for us to review. And by the way, this is the S.T.A.L.K.E.R model, which is kind of the white version of the Pulse model, at least visually of course. But you can see the unboxing that I made if you want to see the card a bit better. In this video we're gonna test productivity, virtual reality and gaming benchmarks. And in those gaming benchmarks we're testing rasterization, ray tracing and even frame generation at 1080p, 1440p and 4K to make things more interesting. Now let's talk a bit about pricing, because in the last couple of months prices have been crazy, with prices going high because the stock is almost non-existent and so on, so let's talk a bit about those. Currently we have cards like the RX 7900 XT costing around $879, the 7900 XTX at around $1,300, which is actually insane, and the RTX 4080 Super at around $1,600, which is so outrageous that you can actually get a pre-built system with the RX 9070 XT and the Ryzen 7 9700X for just a bit more. And in Europe you can get the RX 7900 XT for €750, which is not bad at all, to be honest. The 7900 XTX was mostly out of stock around the stores that I looked at, but I found one selling at €1,167, and the only 4080 Super that I found was at a ridiculous €1,929. Now, if you live in Europe, prices will come with taxes already, so since the 9070 XT has an MSRP of $599, on top of that you apply taxes. So if your country has, let's say, $20% taxes, not $20 taxes, 20% taxes, like we have here, like 23%, you will have the price of the 9070 XT being around €750, around that, depending once again on your country, on the VAT, on the model, and so on. So from 700 to €750, which of course is still way lower than getting a 7900 XT in most countries. And the 9070 XT has new AI features, FSR4 that by the way is very good, and we'll talk about that in the end as well, and many other things. So let me tell you already that the RX 9070 XT is very worth it. Like today's sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. So, benchmarks. Starting with Cinebench R24, we don't really have the results for the RX 9070 XT, as it seems it isn't supported yet. And the same goes for the RTX 5080 or even the Intel Arc B580, none of those cards are supported as well. Budget Benchmark does support these cards though, as we have the 9070 XT performing quite well, being slower than the 4080 Super, but outperforming the XTX by a little, and of course the XT by 5%. In terms of AI generation, we have again the 4080 Super being the faster card overall, up to 2.13 times the performance of the 7900 XTX, but only 66% faster than the 9070 XT. The same 9070 XT is 29% faster than the 7900 XTX and 38% faster than the 7900 XT. Meaning that while the 7900 XT takes up to 3.4 seconds to generate one image, the 9070 XT does it in 2.3 seconds and the 4080 Super in 1.4 seconds. And now we have some VR benchmarks. In the orange room, where things are a bit lighter and more CPU-sided, we have all AMD GPUs performing around the same, with the 4080 Super outperforming them by a little. But as soon as we go into the blue room, a much heavier GPU benchmark, we have the 7900 XTX outperforming all cards, even the 4080 Super, with the 9070 XT this time being the slowest card of them all. As for Blender Open Data, it still doesn't support the 9070 XT, or maybe it is just that the drivers that I got from AMD that don't support it officially, I guess, and this is one of the results that I really wanted to see because RDNA 4 improved a lot in terms of ray tracing, and since AMD cards use the HIP RT here, I'm pretty sure that the 9070 XT results would be very interesting. Our first gaming benchmark is with Assetto Corsa, and at 1080p almost all GPUs are a bit CPU bottlenecked, with the 4080 Super delivering quite a bit more FPS due to driver optimizations for this title. Moving to 1440p shows us a different picture, with the 4080 Super now being outmatched by the overclocked 7900 XTX and the 9070 XT being really close to the 7900 XT. What's interesting here is that even though the 7900 XT is supposed to have more raw power, the 9070 XT outperforms it by 5% stock versus stock and 3% OC versus OC. Very interesting results here. Counter-Strike 2 is still one of the most played games nowadays, and it is also another DX11 title. And it seems the 9070 XT does fairly well at 1080p, but as we move to 1440p the other cards with more raw power start getting ahead, with the 7900 XT now being 10% faster. And the trend continues at 4K, where the 9070 XT is the slowest card here. Maybe some driver updates can fix these results, I don't really know. And even though the previous results were not that great for the 9070 XT, in Call of Duty Black Ops 6, the 9070 XT is the fastest card at 1080p, being 3% faster than the 7900 XTX and 10% faster than the 7900 XT. As we move to 1440p, the 7900 XTX gets the advantage, as it has 96 compute units, while the 9070 XT only has 64, but even here it is 7% faster than the 7900 XT. And that does not change at 4K, where both the 7900 XT and the 9070 XT are beating the 4080 Super. Cyberpunk 2077 is another title where we have great results for the 9070 XT at 1080p. But in this case scenario we are CPU bottlenecked a lot of time, and that's why I thought moving to 1440p would change things. But it didn't. The 9070 XT when overclocked is still matching the 7900 XTX and beating both the 7900 XT and 4080 Super. I mean, even at 4K, the 9070 XT delivers 96% of the 7900 XTX's performance, being also 11% faster than the 7900 XTX. Very good results here. And even though Hogwarts Legacy is filled with NVIDIA technologies, it generally works better on the AMD cards, and we can see that clearly at 1080p. And also at 1440p, where the 7900 XTX is the undisputed champion and the 9070 XT also beats the 4080 Super. Thing that doesn't change at all at 4K, where the results are quite strange to be honest, being a bit unstable with the 4080 Super and even the 7900 XT that had a huge performance loss when running at stock. Still, I guess, great results for the 9070 XT here. And if Hogwarts Legacy runs better on AMD cards, Microsoft Flight Simulator runs better on the NVIDIA ones. At 1080p the results don't really show much, but at 1440p the 4080 Super starts getting ahead, with the 9070 XT still being slightly faster than the 7900 XT, especially when going stock versus stock, being only matched at 4K, where both cards deliver basically the same FPS, even though the 7900 XT has 20 compute units more. Alan Wake 2 is one of those games where I retested basically all cards due to the recent game updates, and is also one of the games where I saw the 9070 XT running very well, and not only at 1080p. At 1440p we have the 9070 XT virtually matching the 7900 XTX and beating the 4080 Super by 4%, which is honestly quite impressive. And even at 4K, this card just keeps on giving, virtually matching the higher tier cards from the previous generation of course, and outperforming the 7900 XT by 11%. Black Myth Wukong is another game that runs much better on the Nvidia cards, and it's filled with Nvidia technologies, and it also seems to run quite well on RDNA 4. Here, the 9070 XT outmatches the 7900 XTX while having 32 compute units less and consuming less power. And going to 1440p doesn't really change much, to be honest, with the AMD cards doing decently well, and even at 4K where the cards with more raw power, like the 7900 XTX, tend to benefit more, the 9070 XT is still able to deliver 97% of its performance. AMD really improved the architecture with RDNA 4. Moving to Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, this is another one of those games where you can't really disable ray tracing. It is always enabled to some extent, and this is why the 4080 Super is demolishing the AMD cards here. Exactly the same happens at 1440p, where even though the 9070 XT's compute units can do much more work ray tracing wise, well, the 32 extra compute units on the 7900 XTX make it a bit faster, only increasing the difference at 4K. But still, the 9070 XT is 3% faster than the 7900 XT, which is far from bad. And Starfield is one of those titles that we all know is poorly optimized, not purely, that would be a joke, nice joke, especially when we're talking about high FPS numbers. And that is why even at 1080p these cards are barely delivering over 100 FPS. And that's also the reason we have only a slight FPS decrease when going to 1440p, where the 9070 XT is again very close to its bigger dogs, another joke, being faster than the 7900 XT, and almost on par with the 7900 XTX. And it even does, well, what is usually not expected for a card that costs $599. It can run this game at 4K 60 FPS without any kind of upscaling, which is honestly a joy to see in 2025. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 also shows some interesting results, with the 4080 Super being much faster here of course, and the difference only gets bigger at 1440p, where the 9070 XT still matches the 7900 XT, and the 7900 XTX gets a bit closer to the 4080 Super. But if we're talking about 4K, well, the 4080 Super is the only card able to deliver 60 FPS without upscaling, while the 9070 XT is now slightly slower than the 7900 XT as well. It is interesting to see how the architecture and drivers affect the performance in different games. And talking about different games and game engines, we have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And this is one of those games where the Nvidia cards just blow the AMD ones out of the water. Although we shall note that there were no performance updates for the previous generation cards up to the 25.2.1 drivers, and I even tested these new drivers on the older generation cards and the performance was the same. This in this game of course, with the 9070 XT outperforming the 7900 XTX in this title at 1080p. And also at 1440p, where it is 3% faster than the 7900 XTX and 13% faster than the 7900 XT. At 4K the 7900 XTX finally outmatches the 9070 XT by a little, but the new architecture just shows to be much better with CryEngine, with the 9070 XT with 64 compute units matching the 7900 XTX with 96. And God of War Ragnarok is another title where the MCM design of the RDNA 3 cards seemed to not work well at all. At 1080p we have the 9070 XT being the fastest of the AMD cards, being up to 7% faster than the 7900 XTX and 19% faster than the 7900 XT, matching the 4080 Super stock performance. At 1440p the other two AMD cards get a bit more ground, but they still get beaten by both the 4080 Super and the 9070 XT. And it takes 4K native for the 7900 XTX to be able to match the 9070 XT's performance, showing us how much of an improvement RDNA cards can be in some scenarios. And Silent Hill 2 brings us some of the most interesting results that I've seen so far. In this case, the 9070 XT is not only faster than the other two AMD cards, as it also delivers much higher 1% lows. And I even retested the AMD cards. I'm even stuttering like Silent Hill 2. I even tested the other AMD cards with these new drivers to see if it was basically the drivers that improved the gameplay smoothness, but it seems that RDNA 4 just handles things much better here, delivering a much smoother gameplay. And the trend continues at 1440p, where the 7900 XTX now outmatches the 9070 XT, but still delivers kind of a much more stuttery experience. And not even 4K is enough to close the difference. I can assure you that I immediately felt the increased smoothness on the 9070 XT compared to the other AMD cards in this game, and it was definitely a game changer in some scenarios. As for Space Marine 2, well, it is one of those games that were optimized for RDNA 3, and also one of those games that take a huge advantage of GPUs with more VRAM and higher bandwidth, if of course you are using the 4K textures. And that's why you see what you see. At 1440p, the 4080 Super is also the fastest card, but the AMD ones deliver a much smoother gameplay. The closer the 1% lows are to the averages, the smoother the gameplay will be. And strangely, it is at 4K that the 9070 XT is able to match the 7900 XT's performance, even though it lost at lower resolutions, where it should have a bigger advantage. Still, not bad results for the 9070 XT here, just a bit underwhelming, I guess. Which is not that bad, because as soon as we move to Hellblade 2, we have the 9070 XT performing exceptionally well once more, being at 1080p 2% faster than the 4080 Super, while delivering much higher 1% lows, 5% faster than the 7900 XTX as well, and 13% faster than the 7900 XT. And what is more impressive is that this has almost no changes at 1440p, where the 9070 XT is still the fastest card since it has virtually the same FPS as the 4080 Super, but of course has much higher 1% lows. And it is only at 4K that both the 4080 Super and the 7900 XTX take the lead, but not by anything relevant, to be honest. Outstanding results for the 9070 XT here. And now we have the averages, and at 1080p we have the RTX 4080 Super being the faster card, with the overclocked 9070 XT being able to match the stock 7900 XTX performance, which is an amazing feat if you ask me. As we move to higher resolutions such as 1440p, we still have the 9070 XT outmatching the 7900 XT's performance, but this time just by a little bit, with the 7900 XTX getting closer to the 4080 Super as well. And at 4K, the 7900 XT virtually matches the 4080 Super's performance, and the 9070 XT is still delivering better performance than the 7900 XT, with usually lower power draw and 20 compute units less. Very impressive. As you saw, in terms of rasterization, the performance is actually pretty nice. We have the 9070 XT usually being, or at least being way faster than the 7900 XT in most scenarios, slightly faster in others, but it is still a win since the card is punching way above its price tag, considering price, considering many other things that you saw. The performance is quite good and quite interesting. Many people were hoping to get the 7900 GRE performance, but we actually get way more. In some titles, it is even matching or outclassing the 7900 XTX, which is actually a very, very good thing and shows us once again that RDNA 4 was a massive improvement. Although RDNA 4 was said to be a massive improvement mostly in terms of one thing, ray tracing, where AMD told us that the performance increase would be massive, at least according to their slides. So let's see if the performance increase is really massive, especially since the 9070 XT has way less compute units than the 7900 XT and 7900 XTX. And as I was telling you, ray tracing performance was one of the key points of RDNA 4, and in Cyberpunk 2077, we have the 9070 XT being 23% faster than the 7900 XTX and 34% faster than the 7900 XT, with the 4080 Super not delivering much more FPS with the LSS because of a CPU bottleneck. At 1440p, we still have the 9070 XT being 22% faster than the 7900 XTX and 36% faster than the 7900 XT, and being able to get around 100 FPS when enabling FSR quality. But to me, it is at 4K where we can notice the most, since the 9070 XT with FSR quality can deliver 53 FPS, while even the 7900 XTX stays at 44 and the 7900 XT barely hits 40. Moving to a lighter ray tracing scenario, we have Resident Evil 4, that uses the RE engine that usually loves AMD cards, or should I say instead, it loves AMD's raw power. And that is exactly why the 7900 XT now matches the 9070 XT even at 1080p. At 1440p, the RTX 4080 Super falls in line with the 9070 XT's performance in terms of rasterization and even ray tracing, which is actually really cool to see. And at 1440p ultra-wide, it is more of the same, with the 7900 XTX with ray tracing enabled, delivering the same performance as the other cards with ray tracing disabled. Moving to The Witcher 3, well, I believe that at 1080p we have some kind of CPU bottleneck when running ray tracing, and I say that because even though all GPUs hit 100% usage, it seems very odd that all have basically the same results. But as we move to 1440p, it is the same, which makes it even stranger, but I guess that's just how the game works or something, because even at 4K, the 7900 XTX, the 4080 Super and the 9070 XT deliver virtually the same results with ray tracing enabled, with only the 7900 XT being considerably slower here. And if you were thinking about path tracing, well, here we are with Alan Wake 2. By the way, the RTX 4080 Super is much faster here because of ray reconstruction, since the heavier thing here with ray tracing is actually the denoiser, and ray reconstruction works much faster in that regard, while the AMD cards do have to use the normal denoiser in the game, so yeah, much heavier. Still at 1080p, the 9070 XT is 28% faster than the 7900 XTX and 42% faster than the 7900 XT. And even I tested the 7000 series cards with these new drivers that seem to improve ray tracing performance a little bit, and even with this, the 9070 XT is just much faster. At 1440p, the only card able to deliver 60 FPS is the RTX 4080 Super, with the 9070 XT managing around 40, and at 4K, it is kind of a slideshow for all AMD cards, with the RTX 4080 Super being able to deliver, well, the awesome console experience, I guess. And well, so far you saw rasterization performance, where the 9070 XT was very good. You saw ray tracing performance, which was a massive increase compared to the 7900 XT and XTX, and if you compare the same computer units with the 7800 XT, it is a way bigger increase, like you can see in the other video that I just made, or that at least I will release in a couple of hours, I guess. But there's more. Let's now see how frame generation works, because frame generation technologies are slightly different, and sometimes it is just not about quality or input latency, it is also about the amount of frames that you can get out of the same base frame rate. So if the card is more efficient, if the technology is more efficient, then with the same base frame rates you'll get more FPS or better smoothness with frame generation. So let's see. Starting with Space Marine 2, we get some interesting results. It seems that frame generation not only delivers less FPS on the 4080 Super here, but also lower 1% lows than the ones that we have natively, with the 7900 XTX, for example, having lower FPS without frame generation, but outperforming the 4080 Super massively with it enabled. And the same thing happens at 1440p, with the 9070 XT getting closer to the 7900 XT, and at 4K we can see that RDNA 4 does frame generation more efficiently, as with the same base FPS as the 7900 XT, it delivers around 4 FPS more. Interesting. And with S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 it is more of the same, and I believe this is one of the reasons Nvidia improved their frame generation recently with the LSS4, making it deliver more FPS. At 1440p we have the 4080 Super performing quite well, but still way behind the 7900 XTX that delivers a way smoother experience. And not only that, AMD's frame generation here is much more efficient, making the much slower 7900 XT and 9070 XT deliver a smoother experience than the 4080 Super, with frame generation. And it is only at 4K that the 4080 Super manages to surpass those cards, even though it has a much higher base frame rate. And the last benchmark here is with Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And yes, somehow frame generation isn't working properly and the game is actually delivering lower FPS with frame generation activated. As we move to 1440p, it seems that frame generation is somehow working better, but still heavily underperforming, close to the 4080 Super level of underperforming actually. And it seems to be only at 4K that the 9070 XT's frame generation seem to work properly, or at least close to what it should be. And with lower base frame rates than the 7900 XTX and only a bit higher than the 7900 XT, well, it delivers the smoother experience of all these cards. But well, I did contact AMD about this issue, so I really hope that they fix it soon. And again, as you saw, the 9070 XT's performance is actually very good, usually punching above its price tag, which should be once again $599 MSRP, with some cards going a bit above that, and of course we have the taxes and so on. But if you go to that, well, the other cards that are competing with the 9070 XT will have a way bigger MSRP or way bigger real-world pricing, which is quite bad. And according to AMD, the 9070 XT will have lots of stock. Let's hope that's the real case scenario. Well, they have at least like almost 3 months to have the stock in store, so I believe that they will have enough stock for everyone. But if you ask me, the 9070 XT is the best card that you can buy right now, and if AMD keeps the MSRP where it should be, and even if the stores have enough stock, the prices won't be hiking like they were with the past couple of cards that we have, because we don't really have stock, so the prices go up. But if the stock is up, the prices will get maintained, and the 9070 XT is definitely the card you want to get, especially if you are upgrading from something lower than the 7900 XT, like the 4070 Super, the 7800 XT, and even lower than that. So it is a very good upgrade, especially since we have AI features now on the software that we didn't have before, things like AI chat and many other things. We have things like FSR4, and let me tell you, I will bring you a review of FSR4, and really, FSR4 is very, very good. Very, very good. From what I tested, it is kind of a mixture of the DLSS, CNN, and Transformer model. It is not completely Transformer model, but at the same time, it doesn't bring as much ghosting as the CNN model. So it is kind of an in-between. It adds way more clarity than FSR and the previous DLSS, but at the same time it doesn't really keep the sharpness or the clarity in motion as much as the LSS Transformer model. So again, it is kind of an in-between, but considering or comparing to the FSR 3.1 version that we had before, it is miles better. Not miles better, but kind of miles away, many times better, like 30 times better, and I'm just taking numbers out of my ass, but yeah, it is just much better, not even comparable. While, for example, in Marvel Spider-Man 2, even the FSR 3.1.3, the latest version of FSR 3.1, was kind of unusable in some scenarios because we still had a lot of shimmering, we still had translucent or transparent particles or pixels, really having a lot of ghosting, having a lot of shimmering, having a lot of pixelation. With FSR4, things are just much better. The only parts where I saw FSR4 kind of having troubles to keep the quality was in the sand parts, and still it was much better than FSR 3.1. It was just not on par with the LSS Transformer model. But besides that, temporal stability, in terms of shimmering, in terms of clarity, is a huge huge improvement compared to the previous FSR 3.1, and now I can tell you right away that FSR is perfectly usable. I've been playing Marvel Spider-Man 2 for several hours with FSR 4 quality mode at 1440p ultra wide, and basically we are upscaling from 960p, and I can tell you that the quality is very good. Finally, we can say that FSR is very usable, FSR 4, and I tested it in, I believe it was, Hunt Showdown, and it was also a very pleasant experience. Again, very good. Basically no shimmering, temporal stability was fine. There were some disocclusion problems in some parts with the weapons and so on, but generally it is just insane what AMD was able to achieve going from FSR 3.1.3 to FSR 4. If they keep improving FSR 4 on the same rhythm that they did with FSR 3.1, I believe that FSR 4 will just get better and better as time passes by, but I believe that it won't really take much time for FSR 4 to be basically on par with the LSS 4, believe me. And when you see it, when you test it, you will know what I mean. So as of now, you have the 9070 XT that is generally cheaper, generally faster, and has a much better upscaling and frame generation quality, alongside the AI features, the AI capabilities, and so on. The only less good points of the 9070 XT are actually the VRAM comparing to the 7900 XT. We only have 16 GB versus the 20 GB on the 7900 XT, and maybe the power draw, which is a bit excessive considering that we are talking about a GPU that has only 64 compute units and is built with 4nm technology. But again, the clock speeds are crazy. As you saw in the side-by-side comparisons, the clock speeds are like 3.2, 3.5, even at stock I haven't seen the clock speeds drop below 3 GHz, so that's why you see the power draw up there. But if you tinker with the card a bit, if we tweak the card a bit, you can get maybe to like 3.1 GHz, which will not hurt the performance a lot, and the power draw will drop by, let's say, 40-50 watts. We can do that. I will show you that on my how to overclocking tutorial, and you'll see that the performance won't drop that much while going down, let's say, 200 MHz, and the power draw will drop as well. Still, the 9070 XT is a big win for AMD. They are on the right path, I believe, and I can definitely tell you, yes, I do advise it. If you can grab one for a decent price, grab it, because it is an excellent card, especially in games where AMD tends to work worse. The RDNA 4 just does exceptionally well, like CryEngine, where the 9070 XT actually performs on par or sometimes outperforms the 7900 XTX, and some other titles where the 9070 XT will just perform very well. So yes, I can definitely advise it. Thank you very much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment in the comment section and let me know if you were impressed or not with the 9070 XT results. And by the way, I'll be releasing another video in a couple of hours of the 9070 XT, versus the 7800 XT versus the 4070 Super, which is basically on par with the 5070. So if you want to go, or if you want to see those results, that video will be here in a couple of hours. So make sure to watch it, because comparing it to another GPU with roughly the same computer units, 64 on the 9070 versus 60 on the 7800 XT, you'll just see how massively the performance increased compared to those cards, which is very good. Thank you once again, and see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.